All right, so President Trump in the last couple of days has been talking heavily about communism. And this is what he said. On Truth Social, quote, communism is the greatest threat to our country since World War I, World War II, Pearl Harbor, or 9/11, end quote. And then Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who was giving a report to President Trump alongside Ben Carson, had this very interesting thing to say.
Then they become God. The president spoke earlier today of the communist threat in this country. We know what communists do around the world. They remove God. They close the churches. They punish the believers. And so this is so important at this point in time in history. And we didn't know about this communist movement a year ago when we were here. But this is the perfect time to stand up and say to America, you have been given this great inheritance and you deserve to have religious liberty.
Now, listen to what he said there. He said that this communist movement a year ago was not known, and it's happening right now suddenly. And then, of course, tying that to religious liberty and Christian values. So what is happening here? Why is he talking about this? And suddenly, where is all of this talk about ideology, about these threats, and all this crazy, in some sense, extremist talks coming from? So I want to get into a couple of clips, some new news, and just what's allowed this to kind of come up. So let's get into it. First, listen to what he says here at this Faith and Freedom Conference. Here, he was initially referring to the Nigerian terrorists that were killing Christians. And then he gives an example about sort of this growing ideology. Listen to what he says.
Think of it, they go into a village and they just kill. We know where they are, we hunt them down, and we take them out. Think of it, they go into a village and they just kill everybody. It's like crazy. They will close your churches in this country. They go communist, and they're trying to. They will kill your people, and that's what they're about. They want to end religion. They have to end religion because their ideology doesn't work. If you have strong religion, people like you that are so incredible and love our country so much and love God. This is the greatest threat to our country since its founding, in my opinion, 250 years ago, what's happening right now. It's the greatest threat. People don't look at that, well, oh, 3 people were elected. No, it's many more than 3 people. And the other people are being swayed because they don't have the sense to see what's happening. They don't have the sense. Their followers are not leaders, even though they're politicians, in some cases successful ones.
So listen to what he says there. A lot of people don't understand the history, the ideology behind communism and why it doesn't work and why it's a threat. There's a lot of idealistic mentality and people are kind of confused by it, especially if you don't have the Holy Spirit, you don't have biblical values and God in the center of all of it. Now, specifically, President Trump said that the communists are making their move. This is a couple of days ago. It's easy to be a communist. All you have to say is, I'll give you everything, but that means you're taking it away from others that have earned it. Over thousands of years, that ideology has not worked once. The game is on. Enjoy watching. Now, likely this is in reference to what Mayor Mondami of New York, who was recently elected, had said about rent freezes. Listen to what he says.
New York, the Independent Rent Guidelines Board just froze the rent. That means if you're one of the more than 2 million New Yorkers who lives in a rent-stabilized apartment, your rent's going to be frozen next year.
That was his way of announcing this historic freeze. Now, there's some caveats, obviously, to that, but it's very telling. Now, listen here to what he says about historical precedents as he's, in some sense, joking about all of this, but yet dropping these truth bombs.
And as you saw with the communists elected in New York City recently, they're communists, they're not social democrats. They want to completely destroy the traditional American way of life. Communism is very easy to sell. It destroys everything, but it's very easy. I'll be honest, I think I'd be the greatest communist in history. I'd give free rent. Ladies and gentlemen, from now on, you don't have to pay any rent. From now on, anybody wants a house, don't worry about it, just pick the house you want. Everybody gets free food. Everything is free from this point forward. Everyone's going to vote for me. The problem is, after 2 or 3 years, the country is a disaster area. The country fails. They always do. It always does. So easy to sell. That first year, boy, you're the most popular. It's happening right now in New York and California. But you'll start living in squalor. You'll live in squalor. There will be no food. There will be no housing. There will be no military. There will be no law and order. There will be no nothing. There will be no nothing. You'll be a third world inhabitant in every way, and everyone will suffer or die. You'll suffer or die. That's what happens. For thousands of years, it's been happening by different names. Thousands of years. I'm telling you, I'd be the greatest communist in history. It would be so easy. You wouldn't have to work. You could stay home. The problem is a couple of years go by, the whole place collapses. Always does. Always has.
Now, again, he mentioned that in the context of Mandami freezing the rents in New York, but also Mayor Mandani endorsed 3 communist or socialist or whatever you want to call it people. But President Trump here mentions Mayor Mandami pulled through 3 solid communists and has received loud and universal applause from the fake news media. Congrats, Mr. Mayor. I went 16-0 last night, helping to elect wonderful American patriots. And the media doesn't say a word. Over the last 2 years, my endorsement has netted 259 primary wins and almost no losses with 0 media attention. And yet, this is getting a lot of attention. Now, these guys, remember, they're selling a lot of communist values, meaning that it aligns with what has historically been done, just as President Trump just illustrated. But they're not going to go outright and say, oh, we are communists. They're going to offer things like free rent and free housing and these things. And listen here to a question from Peter, I think from Fox, who asked President Trump about this.
In the world. Peter?
President Trump, great night for Democratic socialist candidates last night. In the New York primaries, they swept and knocked out 2 incumbents. You're from New York. Why do you think it is that now the endorsement of Zohran Mamdani means more than the endorsement of Hakeem Jeffries?
Well, they're going radical left. They're going really, you talk about the Democrat socialists. It's really communist. That's these people. I watched that woman last night. That's not a socialist. I know socialists. That woman is a communist. And what they don't say is that I was 16-0 last night. But mine were a little more boring, a little more mainstream. They were Republican conservatives. But we were 16-0. And if you look over the last 2.5 years, we're about 347 and just about 0. That's pretty good. But nobody writes that. But he picked 3. They won. They beat a guy named Dan Goldman, who's, a loser. He was one of my prosecutors, one of my many prosecutors that they used on me. Dan Goldman, not a good prosecutor, fortunately, but he's now looking for a job. I was very surprised to see, because he's a pretty liberal guy. When they go more liberal than Dan Goldman, they're really into Never, Never Land.
Now, who is President Trump referring to for these 3 people that have been on the news and talked about because of the endorsement? Well, it's here, Chevalier, Valdez, and then Lander, who all identify as a socialist Democrat. And again, this is for the U.S. House for the primaries, which happened in New York on the 23rd of June. And remember, as he was closing his speech at the Faith and Freedom Conference, this is what he said.
We're going to make it even better. But the biggest thing we have to do is we have to stop this horrible thread of cancer that's permeating our country called communism. We have to stop it because that's what it's about. That's what they want to do quietly. And we ask that God will continue to bless the United States of America.
Now, you got to understand what infiltration is and the method and the means to which they want to infiltrate the American people and subvert what is the United States from within. Now, Clandestine has this commentary. Fun fact, the Communist Control Act of 1954 was passed into federal law to combat the Communist Party of the United States. The CPUSA was labeled an illegitimate party that was on the arm of a foreign conspiracy seeking to overthrow the U.S. government. Sound familiar? That's what we are witnessing right now with the Democrat Party in the present-day U.S. The DNC is no longer a legitimate U.S. political party. These are unlawful enemy combatants pretending to be a political party with intent to overthrow the U.S. government. They're not operating on behalf of the American people. They are part of a foreign conspiracy which is trying to infiltrate and subvert the U.S. from within. The DNC left was the entry point for communism to reach the U.S. under the guise of progress. This is not a game. The Dems are quite literally enemies of the U.S. trying to exterminate and replace the American people. And the only way this country prospers is if we expel this illegitimate party from our nation, exterminate this poisonous left-wing ideology from our society, and hold all the traitors to the fullest extent of the law. Now, this was an AI grab here, but the key provisions of that Communist Control Act was that they were pretending to be a normal political party, was actually, quote, an instrumentality of a conspiracy to overthrow the government of the U.S., function as an authoritarian dictatorship within a republic, demanding rights for itself while denying liberties to others, took orders secretly from foreign communist leaders rather than evolving policies democratically, posed a clear and present and continuing danger to U.S. security. Therefore, the Communist Party should be outlawed. Now, again, this is an official party, political party in the U.S., but President Trump has been calling out some of these people. Recently, he said that Janice Louis George, the communist who is almost certainly going to be elected mayor of Washington, D.C., has stated that she wants to empty the prisons, make D.C. a sanctuary city, oppose ICE, welcome criminal illegal aliens back into our beloved capital, resist anti-crime crackdowns, defund the police, continue and expand cashless bail, and so many other capital-destroying things. In the end, it will never work out, nor will I let it even have a chance because I have worked so hard to make Washington, D.C. the envy of the world with almost no crime and a beautification process that has been second to none. And then he continues, I will meet with Janice Louis George, but must forewarn everyone that Washington, D.C. is again a safe and prestigious community. Many people, including myself, have worked long and hard to get it there, and we will not let it be destroyed by a communist adherent who has no intention to make Washington great again. And again, he's giving more and more attention to educating people about what has happened. Now, he posted this video of Stephen Miller talking a little bit about this. Listen here to what he's saying.
The Democrat Party, Sean, as you've covered better than anybody, has become a party of Marxist, communist, socialist, violent extremists, and yes, violent revolutionaries who support the policies that are getting Americans killed en masse, historically for many years now, and of course it accelerated under the Biden administration, by criminal illegal aliens. This is a party that supports violence against ICE officers, supports violence against federal law enforcement, and engages in conduct and rhetoric and behavior that leads to repeated assassination attempts against President Trump, against President Trump's supporters, and against Republican elected office holders. It is a terrifying reality, but one we cannot turn away from, ignore. We cannot put our heads in the sand and pretend the Democrat Party of the 90s or the 80s or the 70s exists anymore, because it is gone, Sean. It is gone, and it is not coming back.
It is gone. It is
Now remember, this was the entry point. I'm not saying that the Democratic Party, all these people are communists, but this has been the way that there's been radical leftist progression. And President Trump and many white hats are pointing it out right now because they've seen it, they've known about it for a long time, but it is now time for more exposure, more call to action as things are ramping up with this whole spiritual battle, with everything going on, with ideology, with norms, with political parties, and how it's being executed through the votes, through the system, through the American people. So stay prayed up. More to come. Talk to you guys very soon.